recently Nikhil Kamath made a statement that if you are over 25 and you're doing an MBA, then you are considered as an idiot.
He's right in the sense that I don't think it's for everybody. If you are entrepreneur on fire, कोई idea है आपके दिमाग में, I think there's no better school than the school of hard knocks.
If there is someone who's watching this, वो 21 साल का है and अंडर ग्रेजुएशन जस्ट खत्म हुआ है, आप उनको क्या recommend करोगे that इंडिया के बाहर further education pursue करने के लिए जाना चाहिए?
So we have students going to China, going to Russia, going to Ukraine. I would look very broadly and then pick the one that seems most interesting. And in the end, you also have to satisfy your gut. You know, maybe you feel like I want to go to some place like this. Go.
What is one thing that happens inside a classroom of Harvard Business School that people like us are not aware of?
All our discussions are done in amphitheater style classroom. And the reason is that people can then see each other. They're not looking at me, they're looking at each other. Very important.
What's the most memorable interaction you've had with Mr. Ratan Tata?
There's a website on
India is currently the fastest growing large economy in the world, and if you want to take real benefit of this growth story, investing in Indian businesses and companies is non-negotiable. Whether you're already investing in markets or just starting your investing journey, Grow is one of the platforms to do it. Grow's interface is very clean and intuitive. Here you can trade stocks, mutual funds, ETFs, IPOs, bonds, even commodities, all from one app. Portfolio tracking is also very structured. You can see performance, understand sector allocation, and get a complete breakdown of your investments in just a few tabs. And because of this simplicity and trust, Grow has become India's largest stockbroker today. Check out the Grow app today for more details and stay tuned for this entire episode of Conversation with Kushal. तो सर आप अभी हार्वर्ड बिजनेस स्कूल में लास्ट 30 ईयर्स से स्ट्रैटेजी एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप एंड मल्टीपल कोर्सेज पढ़ा रहे हो एंड रिसेंटली लाइक निखिल कामत मेड अ स्टेटमेंट दैट इफ यू आर ओवर 25 एंड यू आर डूइंग एन MBA देन यू आर कंसिडर्ड एज एन इडियट. तो आपका क्या व्यू पॉइंट है फॉर ऑल द स्टूडेंट्स फॉर लिसनिंग टू दिस दैट MBA करना चाहिए नहीं करना चाहिए एंड लाइक व्हाट्स योर एक्सपीरियंस बिन आफ्टर इंटरेक्टिंग विद सो मेनी स्टूडेंट्स वर्ल्ड वाइड?
So I think I don't know Nikhil Kamath, but he's both right and wrong. He's right in the sense that I don't think it's for everybody. You know, if you are entrepreneur on fire, कोई idea है आपके दिमाग में और आप उसी वक्त करना चाहते हैं तो जरूर करो. I think there's no better school than the school of hard knocks. Really. Get on the street, do some dhanda, kuch seekho. But I think there is always a role for reflection. As opposed to fairly stupidly going from one thing to another and burning other people's money and so on and so forth. So there is a role for systematization and thinking. थोड़ा दिमाग भी लगाना चाहिए, not just action. And for some people, I think an MBA makes a lot of sense. If you're going into mainstream careers, the fraction of people doing startups as a proportion of the total young workforce is vanishingly small. Very few people have the idea, the risk tolerance, the safety nets, the ambition to be entrepreneurs. And I don't think we should be here to make value judgments. I don't think Nikhil or anybody else should be making value judgments about people who don't want to be entrepreneurs. There are so many roles in society. You know, when you, I guess, get to be middle-aged, advanced middle-aged like I am, or some of your other interviewees are, you realize that there are lots of ways to contribute to society. And you know, some of the academics, some of the policymakers, politicians, business people, entrepreneurs, everyday managers, we're all doing useful things. So ऐसी बात नहीं है. I think it is a good thing for many people, and for some people it may not be. No issues with that.
So let's say if there is someone who's watching this, वो 21 साल का है and अंडर ग्रेजुएशन जस्ट खत्म हुआ है and इंडिया में अभी, आप उनको क्या रेकमेंड करोगे दैट इंडिया के बाहर लेट्स से फर्दर एजुकेशन परस्यू करने के लिए जाना चाहिए? इफ यस देन यूएस है, यूके, कनाडा, अदर कंट्रीज में जाना चाहिए, या तो पाथवे क्या होना चाहिए उनके लिए टू परस्यू देयर फर्दर स्टडीज?
I think it's a very good question. I left India. I'm a Delhi boy, but I grew up in Mumbai and Bangalore. And I left. I was about to go to IIT Madras. In those days, I would have been very happy with IIT Madras, a spectacular institution. And I won some large amount of money to go to the Ivy League. So I just went to Princeton because I said, this is the land of Einstein. Isse zyada kya hoga? I went, and I'm very happy I went. But I think the reason I'm happy I went is that I got to see the world. I got to see many different facets. And when you're both an insider to India, as I still think of myself as, and an outsider because I live outside and I've raised a family outside in Boston, you see your own country in a very different lens. I think productive lens. So what I would say in response to your question is, ये जरूरी नहीं है कि आपको ही बस्ता संभाल के निकल जाना चाहिए. I'm not going to say that ever. I think 99% of people will live their lives basically where they're born around the world. But you should find a way to get exposed to what's happening around the world. And I think the best way to do that is to engage in peer-to-peer exchange. Okay. Your age group, your interest group people, living in different parts of the world, working in different situations. And आजकल तो technology इतनी बढ़िया हो गई है that there is really no reason not to do that, even if you're not physically able to travel because of personal, financial, logistical constraints or whatever else. So I think it's very important to expand your mind, even if you want to be very practical about it. Let's say you want to build a business, right? The same idea that you have, I promise you, 1,000 people will have had it somewhere else. बिकॉज जो हमारी समस्याएं इंडिया में है वो तो हर जगह है. पानी साफ नहीं है, लॉजिस्टिक्स साफ करनी है, पोल्यूशन हो रहा है दिल्ली में. आई मीन दिस इज ट्रू एवरी कॉर्नर ऑफ द वर्ल्ड दैट आई एंड आई ट्रैवल इन अबाउट 40-50 countries regularly. Okay? Either doing my research and teaching or building enterprises, building commercial enterprises or non-profits in different parts of the world. And I can tell you that there's really nothing really unique about any one country. See, end में आप भी human being हो, हम भी human being है. We're all going through life in the same way, with some pluses, some minuses. So be open-minded. So I think that exposure is super important.
तो एनी स्पेसिफिक कंट्रीज आप रेकमेंड करोगे दैट एक यंग स्टूडेंट को विजिट करनी चाहिए एंड देन डिसाइड करना चाहिए कि ओके अभी मास्टर्स ये कंट्री में करना है?
I think a few years ago, I was said, the US is a place to go. These days, we have so much geopolitical turmoil, so much backlash to immigration in every country in the world, every developed country in the world. Whether you look in Europe, you even look in Turkey, it has so many refugees coming in from different parts of the Middle East. Chile in South America has just elected a very right-wing president, basically because he's anti-immigrant from Venezuela and Colombia. So there is sort of a fever sweeping the world of anti-immigration. So in that environment, I would say that somebody who wants to go abroad to study should look more broadly. Right? And coming from India, of course, you would look at the English-speaking countries. Right? By the way, it surprised me that we still have people going to study medicine, in Russia, Ukraine, or before the Russia-Ukraine war. I was surprised at how many Indian medical students had to be evacuated when that war started, 4 years ago now. So we have students going to China, going to Russia, going to Ukraine. But in the main, people will look at the usual places, which is the UK, Australia, Canada, the US. And frankly, they all have excellent options. So I would look very broadly and then pick the one that seems most interesting. And in the end, you also have to satisfy your gut. Maybe you feel like I want to go to some place like this. Go. I mean, the whole issue is just experience.
Right.
So whether you do it in this path or that path, किसी को कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता.
Yeah. You said that you travel to a lot of countries and you do it for research purpose. Last country आपने कौन सी travel की थी and क्या सीखा था आपने वो country से?
Very interesting question. So the most recent new country. So, places like London, Dubai, Singapore, I go all the time. So let's not count those because those are boring. Stuff in lots of उसमें कोई खास बात नहीं है. I'm trying to think, what's a okay, so I went to Baku. आपको पता है Baku है?
Azerbaijan का capital, right?
Yeah, I see. Very good. Very impressive. Okay, A+. And in Baku in Azerbaijan, at the invitation of a former student who's the vice chairman of their biggest company. And there was some event and he wanted me to be the keynote speaker, so I did. But I really like history, right? And I think the best way to learn about a place is to get a really competent, educated guide and say, let's go walk the streets. Forget about the monuments. I don't really care about the monuments. We can see the monuments. Let's go walk the streets, talk to people, talk to the taxi driver, talk to people, young people in the street. So I did that for a full day. It was fantastic. And one of the things I learned is that some of the holiest places for the Parsi community, okay, are in Baku. And Azerbaijan is a Muslim country. And it turns out that the holy shrines for the Parsis have been maintained by Hindus for hundreds of years, I think. I may have the dates wrong and so on, but for a very long time. So when you go there, you see all these, जैसे अगर आप fire temple में जाएं, Bombay में, Mumbai में, you'll see the sacred fire, the Zoroastrian fire, and so on. There are Parsi colleagues and friends. It's important to their culture and religion. But one of the origins of the fire turns out to be something to do with the gas fields in Azerbaijan. So when you're flying over Baku and you look down, you see fire everywhere because it's the underground gas flares flaring up. But to answer your question, what I learned was there's a fantastic connection, historical connection, and business connections and trade route connections between Baku, Azerbaijan, a Muslim country, right? Persia, these days Iran, and the Parsi community in Mumbai. So I took pictures of myself with all the sacred fires next to the Hanuman ki murti. Okay, so Baku mein Hanuman ki murti, sacred fire ke paas, maintained by Hindus in a Muslim country for Parsis. So that was the most recent couple months ago a side trip. I was going to Istanbul for a board meeting. And so this is only a 45-minute flight from Istanbul. So much again. So
Got it. That's amazing. And which is the next country you're planning to travel? Is there anything lined up?
I am going actually with some of my students, Harvard MBA students, to Riyadh and Jeddah in Saudi for a week in January. And the reason I'm going is I teach a course which at HBS, Harvard Business School, is called International Fields Experiences or something like that. And with a focus on, so some people are taking some of the kids to Japan, some are going to other places, Italy. I picked this because I wanted to know about what's happening in the Middle East. As you know, the amount of money that's being swept up into the sovereign wealth funds, speaking of finance, is in the trillions of dollars, right? And that money is then cascading down through the system as GPs, LPs, and other funds. Those funds are then investing in ventures in different places. So, and Saudi Arabia in particular, under the current de facto ruler, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, has embarked on a massive transformation to essentially introduce market forces more completely in Saudi society and liberalize traditional, primarily social and religious constraints. So I thought it would be a good experience for the students and for me to see a society in rapid transition. तो वो देखने जा रहे हैं, वो देखा और ये समझने जा रहे हैं कि ये सारा जो पैसा ऊपर से आ रहा है, how is it cascading through the veins and arteries of the financial system? A lot of the investments being done in India will originate there also, by the way, through the funds, through the petrochemical complexes, and so on. So, and I oversee a relationship for Harvard with Saudi Aramco, which is one of the world's biggest companies. Maybe somewhere between $1.72 trillion market cap. And so spend some time with Aramco and introduce the students. So yeah, I'm excited.
तो सारे हार्वर्ड के एमबीए स्टूडेंट्स सारे लोग आते हैं ये वाले विजिट में?
It's I mean, you know, our students, like in any good business school, आप निखिल जी को कहिए, जो भी है निखिल. Like any good business school, there are many options, right? And there's a marketplace of ideas. That's what makes these so fantastic. There's a marketplace of ideas. People like me say, or you spoke to my friend Raghu recently in Chicago. So people like us would raise a hand and say, I'm going to teach a course on this because I think it's really important to the students. And then the students look at it and say, अच्छा ये ढंग का आदमी है, नहीं है, क्या experience है इसका, दिमाग ठीक है कि नहीं, क्या लिखा हुआ है इसमें, मैं करूँ कि नहीं करूँ. And there'll be a, like, when you were in college, you probably asked, कि क्या करना चाहिए, कौन सा टाइम पास कोर्स है, कौन सा जबरदस्त कोर्स है, this, that, and the other. So there's a active buzz in a marketplace, and you live and die by, how good the course is. So it's a Darwinian competition. So I offered it. Lots of people signed up. So now we're going. I think about 50 kids are going.
अच्छा, तो आपने आपके पूरे एंटायर टीचिंग करियर में ऑनलाइन प्लस ऑफलाइन कितने स्टूडेंट्स को पढ़ाया होगा? डू यू हैव अ काउंट ऑफ दैट?
Millions and millions. Billions.
Oh, wow.
Millions and millions. Particularly with the online stuff. So, um, I mean, most of what I teach is entrepreneurship because, as I was telling you before this podcast, I don't consider myself a good financier, but I consider myself a good entrepreneur, decent entrepreneur, even though primarily I am an academic. Right? So my self-identity is I'm an academic, very happy being an academic, very proud contributing to society as an academic. But I like being an entrepreneur. Part of my family is a business family. So धंधा एक साइड फैमिली में धंधा है हमारे खून में, दूसरे साइड में सारे फिलोसफर्स हैं, वो भी है हमारे को. तो दोनों अमेरिकन. लोग कहते हैं ये करोगे तो ये नहीं कर सकते, ऐसे व्हाट बकवास, आई डू व्हाटएवर द हेल आई वांट. सो ये हम कर रहे हैं, आधा ये आधा वो. So every time I launch a company in Beijing or in Bangalore, as you know, if you're in the rough and tumble of, in your case, maybe daily investing or whatever else, in my case, trying to build nonprofits or for-profit companies, you learn a lot. You get a lot of thappads every day from the street and say, this is not going to work. And you have to think about it. And so that experience you bring into the classroom and say, let's make it real. I'll teach you the mathematical theories, but I'll show you isko kaise aap apply karoge. That I think makes it both exciting for me and ultimately, if I'm allowed to give a message to the young people on your podcast, main message is make sure you do something where you have fun. Fun नहीं है तो क्या point जिंदगी में? Fun करो कुछ. चाहे कुछ simple नहीं करो, but do something that you really like. Maybe you're a really good chef. Become a chef. Right? Maybe you like street hustle. Do that. Maybe you're a really good teacher. Be a fantastic teacher. Be the best in the world. That should be every kid's North Star. Right?
राइट. तो आपने मिलियंस ऑफ स्टूडेंट्स को पढ़ाया हुआ है. सो आई विल आस्क यू एन इंटरेस्टिंग क्वेश्चन. सो आपका सबसे मोस्ट इंटरेस्टिंग इंटरेक्शन और मे बी हु वाज दैट वन स्टूडेंट अक्रॉस ऑल दीज मिलियन हु रियली लाइक ब्लू योर माइंड एंड आपको लगा कि हाँ मतलब ये कोई मतलब अलग ही स्टूडेंट है एंड इससे बहुत ज़्यादा ही मतलब सीखने मिला या तो कुछ अलग ही एक्सपीरियंस था? कौन होगा ऐसा कोई?
ये तो बहुत मुश्किल बात है. I mean, there's so many, so many every so often. A few years ago, there is a colleague here, from an AI expert from MIT, who joined who's at HBS now, Harvard Business School. He and I started what is now maybe one of the world's biggest educational nonprofits, okay, called Aspire Institute. We have an India outfit also called Aspire Leaders Institute or something like that in Bangalore. But we provide, and I'm going to answer your question through this because I met the student through this effort, but we provide educational services to millions of kids in the free higher education services, 18 to 28-year-old. Right? So आपके podcast demographic का काफी overlap है. And we put them through a very, very hard online course, free. Mixture of asynchronous and synchronous interaction, lots of peer group engagement. तो आपके जो पहले सवाल का जवाब जो मैंने दिया था, you don't need to go overseas, you need to expose yourself. So Aspire Institute, its URL, if I'm allowed to say, or please आप इसको print करते हैं, aspireleaders.org. Go to aspireleaders.org. And you engage in over 10 weeks, about 70, 80, 90 hours of intense peer-to-peer engagement with people who look like you, your age group, your circumstances, from 190 countries around the world. And it's fast-paced and so on. So we did that, and we found that we are doubling in size every year. Right? We've got 30 full-time people, 8 offices around the world, rapidly growing. India is our biggest intake country. Um, in that context, the very first experience that I did, we also had physical events occasionally. So there was a physical event in Dubai, and we selected from this pool 50 kids, and we flew them to Dubai, all free for the kids, right? And this one kid came, I can't remember his name, but he came from Kenya. And he said, so he attended some discussions and debates. So these are low income kids. It's targeted at low income kids. So they have very little access to interesting people and circumstances, no mentoring, um, no peer groups, no guidance, no capital, no social capital. So very hard for them to, their careers to take off. So I said, I'm going to give you a hand and you stand on my hand and take off. That was the spirit of it. So we got these 50 kids from 15 countries, Africa, Middle East, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, anywhere, just good kids to come. First of all, the Indian and Pakistanis met for the first time. I said, Acha, you're a normal person here. I mean, I don't need to fight with you. You're just like a normal guy. So that was a revelation to them. And this one Kenyan kid came to me and he went through the course and very, very good humored, very aggressive participation. And at the end of it, everybody was clapping and saying, thank you so much for this course. It was so amazing. You flew us to Dubai. You housed us for free. You introduced us to this sheikh and this company and that company. और हम तो छोटे से विलेज में आए थे वहां से आए थे कोई चिटागोंग से आया है कोई outside of Nairobi से आया है. We had never traveled. Everybody was grateful. This guy came up to me and he stuck a finger in my chest. What are you going to do for me next? I said, so taken aback. No, thank you. No, nothing. He said, this was great, but what's next? Why did you bring me here? So it took me like 10 seconds to recover. And I said, what would you like to do? He said, I need a legal internship. I want to be a lawyer. I need a legal internship in Europe or America. Coming from Nairobi. I said, I thought, how am I going to deal with all this? But I put out the word because after I recovered, a few minutes, thought about it for an hour or so. And I said, what's the harm? This guy had guts. He came and said, what are you going to do next? Right. Not super polite, but never mind. I think he was fired up. And so I put out the word. He got a legal internship in Amsterdam. Somebody picked him up and said, okay, if you're saying he's a good kid with, spunk and a little bit of productive aggression and seems to want to work and worked hard, try. There is a program here, we can find a way to do it. So, you see people like this all the time. And I think that going back to an earlier comment I was making, 99% of people will live their life where they are born. In that छोटे से माहौल में वहीं पे जिंदगी बिता देंगे. And what I'm trying to do is say that it's not necessary for you to go to Chicago or Harvard or Oxford or MIT or wherever, Singapore. What's necessary for you is to have the mindset that you can really change things wherever you are. Right? And then roll up your sleeves, find something you really want to do and go do the damn thing. Just do it. That's why we created Suspire Institute that's spreading around the world like wildfire. So,
right, that's amazing. कब create किया था आपने?
So we started. I had built a software company in 2008 in Delhi and Beijing, Shenzhen, and San Francisco. It was a global software company that basically these days we would call it an AI company. In those days, people weren't using the term AI. We started in 2008, right in the middle of one of the biggest financial crises that the world has gone through. Basically, the three co-founders, myself, and two brothers. One is from IIT Delhi, and one is from MIT here. MIT is just down the street there from me.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
Created this company, and it was called Aspiring Minds in those days. Became very successful. And the idea was to go use algorithms to administer tests at scale to hundreds of thousands, millions of kids, and to find people in places that nobody looks for talent. So अगर आप IIT में पहुंच गए फिर तो ठीक है. You will get really good jobs and your life will take off and so on. Or you go to a good commerce college or medical school, you'll be fine. But most talent doesn't find its way to these places, right, around the world. So I said, why don't we go test this and see? And we showed that kids coming from छोटे से गांव से who took our test and scored really highly, they got jobs in mainstream companies. I made sure they got jobs in mainstream companies. The companies paid us for it. So we built a very profitable company uh, and sold it to a private equity firm in the UK right before COVID. Um, and but then somebody had the idea, let's use the algorithms to do this at even bigger scale. Instead of doing 1 million kids a year, let's try to do tens of millions of kids every year. And I said, let's do it as a nonprofit because that has different pluses and minuses. It's every bit an entrepreneurial venture. Um, if you see, my main office is right next to the MIT campus, which is about 15 minutes from by car. And we've got 15 full-time people there and 15 full-time people in 8 offices around the world, something like that. And doubling every year in size. So it's about formally 3 years old, very, very young. Informally, if you include the experiments, we did experiments for a couple of years before that. And if you include the antecedents, then obviously we were building a software company on which this is based. So
Right. So, because you've been teaching at Harvard Business School, so offline classroom की अगर मैं बात करूँ, so what is one thing that you want to tell us, in the sense that what is one thing that happens inside a classroom of Harvard Business School that people like us are not aware of or we don't know?
okay, I'm going to imagine what people would want to know. Okay, so the first thing I think is that uh, uh, all our discussions are done in what I would call amphitheater style classrooms. इसका मतलब है जो इंस्ट्रक्टर है वो बीच में खड़ा हुआ है and there's a amphitheater around maybe 270 degrees around you, not 360 obviously because behind are boards and display devices and so on. And it's layered, so it's like a theater seating, right? A round theater seating. And the reason it's that way is that people can then see each other. They're not looking at me, they're looking at each other mostly. Very important. Turns out to be one of the most important things. Because if you put everybody in our conventional classroom, जैसे इंडिया में होते हैं, हर जगह होते हैं, ब्रिटिश स्टाइल के क्लासरूम, कि एक बंदा वहाँ बैठ के कोई पक 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 करी जा रहा है, वहाँ बच्चे बैठे हुए हैं, एक कान में चला जा रहा है, दूसरे कान से निकल आ रहा है. So it's not exciting. We try to make learning fun. And then everything is done very interactively. Right? So when I'm building this Aspire Institute nonprofit that I was talking about, the reason we do everything peer to peer is that there is formal evidence coming out of the Harvard Graduate School of Education many decades ago that the most retention happens if you are an engaged learner, if you participate in the act of learning, not if you're a passive listener. Just like the most learning about धंधा कैसे करना है तभी आता है जब धंधा करते हो. ये नहीं कि किसी ने आपको बता दिया कि धंधा करो ऐसे, ये बुक में लिखा हुआ है, कॉमर्स के रूल्स हैं, ये लॉ है, वो तो एक कान में जाती बाहर से निकल आता है. But you have to build it. Similarly, you have to engage in learning to learn and with fun. So mostly, I think the thing that will surprise people is that it's a heck of a lot of fun. And it's a lot of work. That's the main thing I would say. And also the other thing that may surprise people, it's not all about just making money. Right? Nothing wrong with that. You want to make money, knock yourself out. I'm really happy. Great thing. But people are motivated by different things. Some people want to be the world's best conservationists. Some people want to solve address climate change. India में कितने सारे लोग excess heat से मरते हैं हर साल? Millions. We don't have any measurements for it. We don't have any organization. We don't have insurance programs. We don't have medical treatment devices, right? So lots of problems exist that just need to be solved. So I've started teaching a class at Harvard called Grand Challenges, which is don't tell me that you want to go work for established company. अब मैं companies के नाम नहीं लूंगा, नहीं तो मेरे को emails आ जाएंगे. मेरी बात general counsel से emails आ जाएंगे. But don't tell me you want to work for कन्वेंशनल कंपनी ए, कन्वेंशनल कंपनी बी, कन्वेंशनल कंपनी सी, वो तो आसान है, एक बार आप हार्वर्ड में आ गए वो जॉब पे आपको मिल ही जाएंगे, फिर आप कर देना। कोई ढंग की चीज, कोई बोल्ड चीज करनी है, तब मेरे पास हो। So that's the purpose of the course. Grand challenge. Take on the world's biggest challenges and find some entry path and some exit path from it so that you can contribute something and you can make some money at it, but solve a problem. Right?
Sir, on an average, like Harvard professors, जो होते हैं, like let's say professors who are teaching at these big B schools, so let's say Harvard professors का average salary range कितना होगा?
Yeah, they may, I mean, these are big institutions. So they have, when you say, professor at a prominent institution, there are lots of people who use the title professor. There's the mainstream academic professors, right, who are um, so-called tenured or tenure track. Tenure is a system in the American Academy where if you make it through some gating criteria that are quite stringent, then you have lifetime appointment as a faculty member. So there is a class of people teaching in these schools, all at probably top 50 schools or so, that are called ladder faculty or tenure track or tenured faculty. So that's a portion of them. And we have a lot of people who have been successful in the workforce. They may have run companies, they may have built interesting funds, they may have been, mayors or politicians in cities in different countries around the world, cities around the world. Very often when they've done that career, they come back and they say, we want to teach for a few years. So they also are called professors. They're also in there. And then about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, one of my colleagues who's now retired set up a program at Harvard called Advanced Leadership Institute, ALI. A lot of Indians go through it every year, but it's meant for people who've had some success in their profession and are, I want to say, late 50s, mid 50s, late 50s, who are thinking these days human lifespans are getting longer. And people may be retiring at 60 or something like that. But you potentially still have 20 years of worth left if you want to. And agar sehat theek hai, dimag theek hai, kuch karna hai, you could do it. You could also just retire and play golf and have chai. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But in case you wanted to do something, we admit a small group of them to come to Harvard and say, fine, come and spend a year, take courses anyway, work on a giant project that you want to do as your next career. So why am I saying this? These ALI fellows are sort of like faculty type affiliates, right? Because they're wandering around mentoring young kids. So what I'm trying to communicate to you is that there's a tapestry of people who are in and out. There are, of course, the students, the classical students, so undergraduate, graduate students in all fields of the college, but also business, law, medicine, politics, public health, education, divinity school, all sorts of stuff. But then there are these other very, very important people in the fabric of society.
So, like because you've been teaching strategy, entrepreneurship. So, अगर मैं entrepreneurship की बात करूँ, and if I can talk about the Indian economy specifically, India versus China also, because you've written a book on that as well, and you've like written research papers on that. तो अभी इंडिया में like you said that the danger which India has right now is falling into the middle income trap. So इसका क्या meaning है and इसको कैसे resolve कर सकते हैं?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the middle income trap is a phrase that's well known in policy circles. It just means that it's an empirical statement that countries that reach middle income status, I forget what the technical boundaries are in lower middle income and upper middle income. Call it $2,500 per capita income. Okay, at the lower end, and maybe 5, 6,000, 6,000, 7,000 at the upper end. So India is, I think, technically a lower middle income country. We're now called middle income. We're not called poorer country, which is fantastic. And that's the result of enormous progress in the last, since 1991, I guess I would say. And certainly both the UPA government and the current government have push through reforms. There's an amazing digital backbone that's been created by, let's call it Nandan and his friends, Nandan and his friends, Aadhaar, India Stat, blah, blah, blah. Fantastic things. Some of them are best in class and whatever. I think that is what has allowed us to get to that and the unleashing of entrepreneurship. So there were two books that I would point people to that I think capture this. Self-servingly, one of them is mine. It's called Billions of Entrepreneurs, right? Which I wrote as a first-person account of entrepreneurial journeys, mine and others, in China and India uh, in the early 2000s, right? So the book was written in 2008, did amazingly well, long time. But even before that, there was a book by Gurcharan Das, which was even better than mine. It was called India Unbound. And I think he was capturing this idea that once we dismantled the license Raj and the MRTP and all this, and we unshackled people like you, right, who went out and did things, then there was no stopping India in some sense. That's the good news side. That's why we have gone from poorer to wealthy. What I keep saying to uh, my country of origin, country I love, India, is that we should hold ourselves to a higher standard. And to get out of this empirical middle income trap, I think that one of the single things we have to do is institutionally recover a scientific mindset. We are underinvesting in science massively. The amount of money that's going into science, certainly in the United States, uh, but more immediately in China, is extraordinarily large.
When you say science, what does that mean exactly?
Money that goes into research and development, money that goes to the universities to fund science, um, and as much as money, the organization of how scientific research is done, whether companies and entrepreneurs understand the value of science, right? Which affects every single company in the world. I don't care if you tell me, I'm a builder, I don't do science. मैं real estate बनाता हूँ, I don't do science. I say bakwas. If you don't do science, you're shortchanging yourself. Because there is so much in science that results in better building materials, better optimization, better airflows, that makes construction far cheaper. Right? Um, what's another example I sometimes use? Because people say, "Oh, we're not a science company," and I say that's nonsense. Everybody's science. Uh, there's a company in America called Hershey, a chocolate company, Hershey Company. It's very famous here. And if you go to the production line, their flagship product it's called a Hershey Kiss. It's a little piece of chocolate wrapped up in a conical way with a little tin foil around it. The amount of science that goes into figuring out what is the material composition of the chocolate and what is the material of the वो जो गोल्ड या सिल्वर फॉइल उसके ऊपर जाता है, जो चिपकता है पर ज्यादा नहीं चिपकना चाहिए, लेकिन पर कितना चिपकना चाहिए ताकि गिर ना जाए, उसमें इतनी मटेरियल साइंस, इतनी अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ कैपेसिटेंस, अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ विस्कोसिटी, फ्रिक्शन. Extraordinary number of scientists are working on it. And the way it happens is that the company will go to the local university and say, who's working on these problems? Material science, for instance. Come and tell us how to do this. So there will be a back and forth. हमारे इंडिया में नहीं होता ये. So I'll tell you a real story. Must have been 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. There was a CII event I think in Bombay or Delhi, I can't remember. They call it their partnership summit, which is their big event. And so I was asked to give one of the main talks. And it ended up being much more fun than a talk because it was Uday Kotak was interviewing me. And I said, let's talk, let's sit on stage and talk instead of interviewing. Just हम अभी बात कर रहे हैं. And in the course of that, I remember asking, there must have been 80, 90 people, senior people, CEOs of companies in the audience. I said, अच्छा एक बात बताओ कि इस गैदरिंग में कितने लोग हैं? Raise your hand. If in the course of running your regular business this last year, you have had an honest to goodness conversation with a scientist. अच्छा, कुशल जी आप बताइए, इस 70 लोगों में से कितने हाथ ऊपर गए? What do you say?
थिंक 10-12 जान के 12-15 लोग
ये-
वो आए फर्स्ट।
तो वो भी फार्मा का बंदा था, pharmaceutical, Samsung, I don't know what it was, I can't remember. And I said, look around you. If I ask this question when I'm teaching executive education to CEOs from all over the world in Boston, guaranteed 35-40% raise their hand. And they would be in every segment of society. Okay. And I'm just telling you that there's so much, you're leaving billions, even trillions of dollars on the table by not investing. Now, our rate of investment in science, as revealed in the national numbers, national income accounts of government of India, are so R&D divided by GDP, samajh. Depending on how you count it, it's like 0.5, 0.6, 0.7%. Okay. And going in the wrong direction, going down. Okay. Because GDP is going up, we're not spending more, R&D is going down. China's is in the high 2% or 3%. US is in the mid 2%. Korea is in the high 4s. Israel is in the high 4s. So people who are going to get ahead are investing like crazy in science, right? We are not. I am actually worried about this. So I gave a keynote address at the NDTV Global Summit a few weeks ago. And I titled it basically Science and Sovereignty. I said, our sovereignty will be called into question. And then you'll have to make a lot of concessions to people who own the intellectual property in the world, whether it's in genomic sciences, personalized medicine, satellite communication, cybersecurity, material science, of course, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, robotics, nanoparticles. List is endless. Kahan kar do? This is what we need to do. We can do it. We have all the talent. We just need the organization. And we need the universities and the scientists to stop pointing fingers at each other. तो उस CCI इवेंट में जब हमने पूछा था कि भाई कोई करता क्यों नहीं है, तो कंपनी वाले कहते हैं कि अच्छा, आई गिव आल्सो कीनोट एड्रेस एट इंडियन इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ साइंस व्हिच इज आवर प्रीमियर साइंटिफिक इंस्टीट्यूशन, मे बी अराउंड द सेम टाइम. एंड मिरर इमेज, राइट? कंपनी सीईओ से, सर हमारे जो साइंटिस्ट है वो अपने वाइवरी टावर में बैठे हुए हैं, वो कोई काम का चीज करते हैं नहीं. बाय द वे, इज नॉट ट्रू. I mean, there's a distribution. There are people who are doing very good work. You have to go find them. It's really not fair. And the scientists are saying, भाई हमारे business के धंधे वाले लोग सारे corrupt हैं, पता नहीं क्या कर रहे हैं, पैसे बना रहे हैं इधर उधर. We don't want to deal with that. That's also not right. There are lots of people who are making an honest living, doing really amazing things in India. So I think on both sides, this mutual mistrust that needs to be attacked. Now we've made some good steps lately. You know, this Anusandhan NRF, National Research Fund, and some new funds that have come up for deep tech and so on. So the intent is there. I think we're starting to realize what a bunch of us are saying. And I chair a nonprofit in Delhi called FAST, Foundation for Advancing Science and Technology. And our sole purpose is to promote scientific literacy in India and to help the policymakers by being an independent sounding board and giving them input on this. Ki duniya mein kya ho raha hai, ye aap bhi dekhein. So I'll give you one last example. One of the companies I co-founded with my student is a company called Chai Point, which is India's largest chain of tea stores now. अब चाय की बात करोगे, आप ये कहोगे इसमें कोई साइंस की कोई बात है नहीं. चाय तो हम रोज बनाते हैं, सदियों से बना रहे हैं. मम्मी बनाती है घर में 3-4 बार दिन में. हमारे डोमेस्टिक हेल्प बनाते रहते हैं चाय. सड़क पे जाओ तो कोई आपको कटिंग चाय दे रहा है वहां पे. कितने की मिलती है कटिंग चाय कोलाबा में? But it's as low as 10 rupees for a small, not very clean cup of tea. Then you go to the, Irani cafe and the other cafes and so on. Then it's like 30 rupees, 40 rupees. Then you go to the CCD coffee cafe day, it's 100 rupees. You go to Starbucks, it's 300 rupees. Right? So we've got the whole spectrum. from 10 rupees to 300 rupees. So my student and I created a company called Chai Point. Okay, very successful, right? Which I think we have about 200 stores open now, primarily in Bangalore and Delhi, and then smaller numbers in other cities. But the reason I'm bringing up this in the example of science is that during COVID, when our stores were doing very badly, because sare stores band ho gaye the, so retail was in very big distress. Amleek Singh, my co-founder, former student at Harvard, I think graduate of Punjab Engineering College and then Harvard Business School. Technologist, worked for Microsoft, worked for a big storage company. And then he and I started this company about 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. But we have developed an entire line of state-of-the-art robots called Box Chai. And those robots are plug and play with enterprise software, tech stack, minute by minute tracking, biometric connection to your taste. कुशल की चाय दुनिया में कहीं नहीं मिल सकती है. अब अपना आंख दिखा लो रोबोट को, रोबोट आपको कुशल की चाय बना देगा आपके टेस्ट से. It's all science. It's all science, engineering, design, prototyping, robotics that has been done in Bangalore, in some place in Maharashtra. I want to say it's either Kolhapur or Nasik, I forget. Shenzhen in southern China for some of the early robotics that we did. And as a result, we are able to now distribute tea soon, probably at cutting chai prices. Yeah. तो अब देखो क्या कंपटीशन में कितना मजा आने वाला है. इंडिया में कितने we sell 1 million cups of tea a day.
Oh, wow.
And we are only 1% of measured out of the home consumption. So 99% is still being done informally. तो ये कारोबार बना रहे हैं हम. And we employ a lot of people. So one of the union ministers was saying to me, I won't name him, saying, बेटा ऐसा करो, ये जो रोबोट आपने बनाया है, आप women entrepreneurs को दे दो free में. I said, we can give the robot for free because we'll make money off the robot, right? Like a service contract. So we use the term software as a service, SaaS, right? We can use chai as a service, CAS. Okay. किसी लेडी को दे दो, like a poorer person, poorer segment of society, and say, आप ये जो रोबोट है, आप इंडिया के सारे ट्रेन्स में ऊपर नीचे लेते जाओ और हॉट चाय बनाते जाओ रोबोट को प्रेस करके करके करके. तो उसमें से 10 रुपए में से आप 3 रुपए रख लेना, 4 रुपए की एक्सपेंसिव हो जाएंगे, 3 रुपया हमें दे देना, आपकी आमदनी बहुत अच्छी हो जाएगी. Much better than what you're doing right now. Very comfortable. पैसे बनाओ, employment create करो. So we need to use, I'm giving this example because it is the most mundane example, chai. What could be more permeating Indian life? Yes. But I'm saying that because of science, we are asymptotically, mathematically lowering the cost of a cup of chai to such a low level that we can unleash entrepreneurship in chai delivery.
राइट. आपने आपने बताया कि चाइना में जैसे 2.5 to 3% R&D एज अ परसेंटेज ऑफ जीडीपी है, वही सेम नंबर इंडिया में 0.5 0.6 है. बहुत सारे लोग ये भी बोलते हैं कि इंडिया इज लाइक 50 years behind from China. Do you agree with this? If yes, what is something that India needs to do and what is something India can learn from China?
I would not agree with 50 years behind. I mean, there are many dimensions on which India does better. I think the Indian tech stack is better, actually. And the whole spirit of India Stack and Aadhaar was to try to make sure that, unlike what's happened in the US, so the US is really dominated by the big tech companies, really. Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, Netflix, things like that. Right? And China is dominated similarly by the Ant Group, Alibaba, Tencent, the Shenzhen, the ByteDance, the TikTok parent. But I think the thought experiment in India was very much, we want there to be a level digital playing field. for everybody. We don't want a handful of companies to control everything. So in that sense, I think just like the roads generally are available to everybody. Of course, you have occasional tolled highways and so on, but the roads are available for anyone, poor person, rich person, anyone who uses it. Similarly, digital roads should be available to everyone. You shouldn't have to pay Meta or somebody to get access to something. So I think in that sense, India is far ahead of China on that particular matter. So you have to be very careful about what you're comparing. So media freedom is still much greater in India than in China by far. Chinese have tightened the grip a lot, particularly under Xi Jinping, significant amount. But where China is light years ahead is in the science. They have invested so aggressively. There was one of my colleagues did a very nice scientific analysis, which I showed a picture of his analysis at the NDTV summit. So that's on YouTube. You can look it up. The graph is also available on that with his permission. And basically what he had done is he identified, as I remember, a dozen areas that the US considers vital to national security, the most important technological areas. And he just said, what is the patented activity in each of the US and China, in each of these 14 categories over the last 40, 50 years? And really, if you can imagine the graphs for each of these dozen or so areas, the US led until about 15 years ago in almost all of them. And in the last 15 years, China has left the US in the dust, way back, as in like the line, I don't know if you can see, the line looks like this, right? Chinese line looks like this, the US line looks like this. In all the areas, every one of the dozen areas. So I think we have a lot to learn from the Chinese on this particular issue, not necessarily on some of the other issues, but on this particular issue. And they have really built up a supporting ecosystem through really amazing entrepreneurship. And we can do it. We are doing it. We just haven't doubled down on science. That's my view.
तो ये डजन एरियाज जो आप बोल रहे हो ये लाइक एक दो एरियाज क्या हो गए इन द सेंस व्हाट आर दीज एग्जांपल्स
Be like nanosciences, micro robotics, cyber capabilities, genomic sciences, across the spectrum, satellite related sciences.
तो सब में चाइना इज अहेड ऑफ यूएस नाउ
By that measure, by recent patenting activity. So, which is a leading indicator of what's going to happen next year. So imagine a world where most of the intellectual property is controlled by 5 or 6 countries. Anybody who's not in those 5 or 6 countries, particularly a country that aspires to have a seat at the world table, like we do in India. It's good, right? Very difficult world you don't have the bargaining power, very difficult world to compete in. And the good news is that it's changeable. It'll take 10 years, but 10 years, if we start now, we can fix it in 10 years. So,
what's the most memorable interaction you've had with Mr. Ratan Tata and Mr. Narayan Murthy and क्या ऐसी चीजें जो आपने उनसे सीखी और आपने हमेशा लाइफ में अप्लाई किया?
Oh, that's interesting question. So, lots of good memories. R&T I'm very fond of. I really looked up to him as a classy guy. Modest. I'm trying to think what are good memories of him. So many. So in 1995, I remember I came with a colleague I think he had just taken over as chairman of Tata Sons, maybe 2 years before or something. And all the consulting firms were telling him, do A, do B, do C. And we had a class for, senior executives, Indian executives in Mumbai somewhere. Must have been in the Taj, the Gateway Taj. And he came and sat next to me. I attended a class on which I taught on a case on Tata's, House of Tata. in 1995. I still remember that. And he sat next to me and listened to the discussion. And then very honestly, very candidly, addressed, didn't trumpet his own horn, uh, just very modest, accepted all the criticisms that students had made, the CEOs in the room had made, and took notes, little pad, kya kya fix karna hai? And then left in his little car. Like, I don't know. I don't think there was no Nano those days. It was like a little Fiat or something. वो दरबान लाया गाड़ी अपने आप रहे क्योंकि चले कोई शोर नहीं कोई शराबा नहीं कुछ नहीं back to his dogs in his I think Woodhouse Road के पास जो कुलाबा पोस्ट ऑफिस होता था वहीं के आसपास में उनका घर था समुद्र पे और अपने कुत्ते थे और ठीक था. So I'm very happy with that. And then one time I had a lovely interview with him. Uh, I was interviewing him like you're interviewing me, right? For this video archive that I was creating of iconic entrepreneurs around the world. There's a website on the Harvard Business School website called Creating Emerging Markets. If you just say HBS Creating Emerging Markets, you'll see 200 hour-long videos of famous entrepreneurs. Yeah, Abhi dekhe, from 30 countries. And I love the interview that R&T, the conversation that R&T and I had. And we talked about it many years after that. And he talked a lot about the mistakes he had made in acquisitions and turnarounds and worker relations. Data activities, Korea, TCS, Jaguar Land Rover acquisition, and how he thought about the opportunities in India. So those are two very pleasant memories. With NRM, Narayan Muthiah had much less interaction, though most recently I saw him at the NDTV Summit. He was sitting with Sudhaji right behind me. And his son, Rohan Murthy, was a student here at Harvard many years in computer science. Rohan's building a very nice company in London. What do I know? Way back when, I want to say in the 90s, he must have been visiting Harvard for something. Already a famous face of Indian software. Must have been a few years after Infosys did its IPO. And what I remember of him, this memory may be imperfect. I just remember him waiting patiently, reading a book somewhere. No drama, no fuss.
He shared a story that he was imprisoned for 72 hours in Yugoslavia.
I've heard the story also, when he was
Yeah.
in his student days or right after his student days when he was starting out. Maybe he was working at Patni Computers or something like that. As I have less interaction with NRM than I did with R&D. But mostly what I take is that these are people you remember for their personality, not for their cash.
Right.
I think those are the memories that survive.
Yeah.
Amazing. Last question, which is a tricky one. So if you were in the shoes of Kushal Lodha and if you were interviewing Mr. Tarun Khanna, what is one question you would like to ask him towards the end?
I don't know. I guess that's a hard one, Kushal. What makes you happiest?
What makes you happiest?
Okay. What makes me happiest is basically traveling to strange places with my wife and kids and just exploring, unlimited exploration. Like my Baku, Azerbaijan story.
Yeah.
But preferably with the family.
Right. Amazing. Thank you so much, sir, for doing this. Had an amazing time. And thanks for all the insights and wisdom that you've shared.
Stay in touch and hopefully I'll pass across in Mumbai or Delhi or someplace. Yeah.
Definitely, sir. Thank you so much once again for doing this. Thank you so much for watching this video till the end. Before we end this video, I'd like to thank Grow for being our title sponsor. With support like this, we can deliver actionable finance content to our audience. So go ahead and download the Grow app today and tell us in the comment section which guest you want so that we can invite them. Also, ऐसे कौन से questions है जो मैंने पूछने चाहिए थे, कौन से questions है जो मैंने नहीं पूछने चाहिए थे, ऐसे कौन से parts है आपको लगता है trim करने चाहिए थे, हमें comment section में बता देना ताकि we can give you the most value additive content. Thank you so much once again for watching this entire podcast and stay tuned for more amazing episodes of Conversation with Kushal.
Investment in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.